So I want to break down my understanding of the relationship between satanic world domination, Egypt, Solomon, Freemasonry, and the tribes that are involved in all this, both human and non-human, from the perspective of somebody that's been studying the Quran for about the last 15 years. And you could consider me to be like a non-sectarian Muslim revert, being as I've based my religious doctrine off of the Quran and not the monkey see, monkey do tradition of any religious establishments. Now, as far as racial tribe goes, my mother's side would trace back to pre-America English colonies, and then my father's side would trace back to a Ashkenazi settlement in Prussia. So, presumably, I'm primarily European. There's a little bit of this and that mixed in there as far as that goes, and Ashkenazi on my father's side. Now, with that out of the way, the subject matter, I don't want to get too fixated on quotation and citation because it'll distract me from what I'm trying to say. So you could reference that easily enough yourself with the supercomputer in your pocket. And especially the Quran is a very easy to navigate book. So do as much of that as you want. Now, I think it's important to start off with the genesis of man, right? When Adam was introduced to the previous creation would be the angels, right? And the jinn. Now, for those of you who don't know, the jinn would be basically considered demons by Christians. And where the Quranic teaching differs from that is that there doesn't seem to be any evidence to suggest that they are inherently good or bad. Rather, it suggests that they are beings of free will. Nothing about a fallen angel story or anything like that. They're beings that predated mankind. They have free will, and then their inherent physical nature is that of a smokeless fire. You could surmise that they're not limited by carbon in the way that human beings are. So they may possess supernatural abilities, and they may possess a different lifespans than mankind as well. So, when Adam was introduced, he was basically introduced to assume a position as like caretaker of the world, I guess, so to speak. And he was given a natural esteem. So he was to be respected by the angels and the jinn, and he was, except for by one of the jinn known as Iblis, which the Christians would know as Satan. So basically, he protested this. He didn't believe that Adam deserved his respect because Iblis thought of himself as elementally superior to Adam. Now, the jinn would be the smokeless fire. Mankind would be like a clay which God crafted with his hand. So God impressing himself upon clay to craft man. And Iblis basically insulted that, and he staked his being on being able to prove to God that mankind would be ungrateful and that he would be able to basically subvert them and pull them away from the straight path that God wants us to be on. So he was granted the ability to try to prove that with the believers, the God's loyal believers being off limits, and the portion of those that he is able to influence would occupy hell with him eternally. So it would be of our own volition if we were to end up there. He can't force us to go there with him. That's the basic ground rules, and he has access to do that until the last day, which the last day, our eternal destiny is going to be decided, the day of recompense, collectively will experience this together. So, among the Jinn, there is believers and disbelievers. Among mankind, there's believers and disbelievers. Believers being submissive and compelled to align with the will of God, and then disbelievers, you could say, primarily doing the same thing, but with the will of Iblis. So those are the two basic paths, right? So fast forward to Egypt. That's a situation where we have a despotic regime under Pharaoh, I believe to be Ramses III, during the time of Moses or Musa. Now, they ended up coming together. They were at odds with each other. Egyptian society at the time was this polytheistic society, and the state, right? So the elite that controlled the Egyptian empire, the pharaoh and his underlings, they were involved in polytheism, and they had magicians or sorcerers that they were in tight with. They were also hostile to this monotheistic doctrine that Moses came with. And during this situation, they were holding, I'm just going to use this colloquially, the children of Israel would be probably the correct way of doing it, but most of us would understand it as the Jews. The Jews were being held captive in Egypt, and their male offspring were being killed off, and their females were being kept. So, this is based off the Quran. So, you could surmise that when they entered Egypt, as they were a distinct tribe. They've always been a distinct tribe, the children of Israel. And they underwent a transformation while they were there. The transformation being both ideological and genetic, and kind of like a combination of the two. So genetically, you figure the tribe persisted by way of the female offspring. So who were they reproducing with? The powerful men of Egypt, right? The Egyptian elite. So they came out of that situation as a genetic combination of the female slave and the Egyptian ruling class, which isn't something that I really hear people commenting on very directly, even though it seems to be written on the wall there, which also makes you wonder about the matrilineal nature of Jewish ancestry. They trace it by mother. It would make sense because it would have dead-ended at Egypt. If they were to trace it by father, they would lead them to an Egyptian man. There's kind of a hard stop there. So they persisted by way of the mother. Now, when they were freed, right off the rip, they were missing aspects of Egyptian society before they even were fully delivered to freedom. So while they were in transit from slavery and going through the desert, they were being provided for by God with cloud cover and food, which was a miracle. So they were actively experiencing a miracle during this travel, and they were reminiscing about cucumbers, lentils, and onions, which just goes to show, like, even the petty aspects that were involved in their life of slavery, they were kind of already missing. So my take is that, there was probably a persistent permanent blood memory forever. Just that's kind of evident and observable, mainly being in the ideological aspect that was taken out of that nation. So with there being the Egyptian religion of what I would come to understand it as Hermeticism, right, which is what I believe to be archived for mankind in the Kabbalah that was given in Babylon by the angels Harut and Marut. It is this mystical practice, which most people would know as magic, right, and a forbidden practice. So it was given to mankind as a test by those angels, and it contained what they did in Egypt, and the result was basically the fracturing of society at its nucleus. The Quran describes the separation of husband and wife. So the destruction of the nuclear family, which the ripple effect would destroy society, right? And it is something that people engage in effect, selling their soul, trading their heavenly future for worldly gain, and engaging in what ultimately stands to harm them. So anyway, as I understand it, that would be Hermetic Kabbalah given in Babylon, which was what they were engaged in Egypt under Pharaoh. Those who have held on to it traditionally have been Kabbalist Jews. And if you were to hear it from them, their idea or their philosophy behind this doctrine is that it's permissible because basically it's been a feature of religion forever. And all of the prophets have been involved in this mystical aspect of their religion. And the key one being Solomon. So Solomon would be, purported by them as somebody that was engaged in adultery and sorcery, in effect. And he wielded the power of demonic forces or angel, whatever they want to classify it as, right? Supernatural force to produce miracles. And one of the key ones of those being the temple that he had to show for. So now going back to Quran, right? Solomon is described as a righteous person that was gifted miracles, like the ability to interact with nature in such a way that he could influence the wind. And he had birds that were subordinate to him that basically did reconnaissance missions, like what a modern day drone would be, but a bird would be better capable. So he had all that going for him. And the temple was an architectural miracle. The Quran describes the construction of this temple being done with the help of jinn that were contracted in this process to do things like the teleportation, basically, of a throne, and also making floors out of glass that appeared to be water. So things that were outside of human capability went into this architectural marvel, which was one of the miracles involved with Solomon. Wasn't described as unlawful or sorcery or anything of the kind. So I think this justification of practicing the Hermeticism is based upon falsehood. Now, the Masonic tie-in, crusades have been going on for a long time in pursuit of the reconstruction of this temple. The Knights Templars were basically a faction of people that presented as Christians that were involved in this mysticism. You could say the Hermetic mysticism, right? Which they were ultimately charged for, because Christians, like well-intended Christians, don't approve of that kind of stuff. But anyway, they masqueraded as Christians, and they were presumably in a coalition with somebody that had ambitions on the land that the temple was supposed to be reestablished. The Templars, after they were, they participated in the Crusades, they did war crimes and all that kind of stuff. They were ultimately, I think they were persecuted for sodomy. The guys were messing around with each other and they were engaging in magic. They went under rebranding where they became Scottish Rite Freemasons. And to this day, as I understand, when a person joins Freemasonry, they pledge to be a builder of the Temple of Solomon. Okay, so in a sense, you're making a pledge to be subordinate to this agenda. Now, what's important about the reconstruction of the Temple of Solomon, right? It's implied that the end game is to reestablish the Solomonic kingdom, which is supposed to be like a world superpower that is governed by a particular tribe, those who descended from Solomon, right? Which would be those who were delivered from the conditions of slavery under Pharaoh. It's like a birthright. Okay, now the problem is during Solomon's life, one thing that he asked of God was that his kingdom end with him. And so it did. And so even though there's been all these attempts throughout history to reinstitute this kingdom, along with the temple, it's been in a state of perpetual failure because that's going against God's will. And so you can bet that it's never going to happen. But these people that subscribe to that doctrine are going to keep trying. So Freemasons also exist today, and many of them appear to be very well intended. I kind of formed my basis of knowledge off of that. I completed Morals and Dogma by Albert Pike, I think like 2 or 3 times, which he basically defined what modern Scottish Rite Freemasonry is, because I'd like to be able to correctly identify what these elements are without dipping into the point of transgression. So yeah, that. Also, Manly P. Hall, I listened to his lectures and covered maybe a couple of his books. And then I dug into it with Master Masons any chance that I could get, one of them being a lodge leader. Now, like whenever I dig into the Solomon connection or whatever, it seems like there's a lot of omission there, feigning ignorance. Same thing with the Kabbalah tie-in, but I mean, it's not like it's there for no reason. It seems to be very obvious. And it's also, I mean, obviously there's a power structure there. Many people would dismiss this power structure as like, being incidental or whatever. It's like, oh, it's more expensive than anything to be involved with that. It consumes time and money. But take it from a lodge master. You could network with people that run local banks. So they're, I think when you become a master Mason, you kind of transcend the compartmentalization of the lower degrees where you don't really know what's going on. So in a sense, the philosophy and the practices of the Kabbalah would be the top of the pyramid, but it would also function as the foundation. But the people that occupy the foundation may not know what exists at the top of the pyramid, what they're heading toward, even though they took a pledge out of ignorance, largely. They never thought about the implications of the pledge that they took, even though, like, if you were to read the Quran, you could easily put 2 and 2 together as to what they're signing up for. And yeah, it's like an oath to serve this thing. So there's that, okay, which I would venture to guess that they're probably very well represented among the evangelicals that are playing into these crusader initiatives today. As you see, it's obviously still happening. There's a very strong interest with that, right? And as far as the whole world superpower thing goes, as referred to in Quran, the children of Israel were described as a group that received preferential treatment forever. And part of the prophecy is that they would basically live out two distinct eras within world history where they would be granted like global prominence, wealth, influence, positions of power, etc. Right, where they are, we're basically there at the top of it all. But this is kind of where it ties back to the Egypt thing. The rule was, when as this era is coming to an end, the rule that it's described as being like that of Pharaoh, and that they would become haughty and despotic, right? So basically, a really bad abuse of power would happen, marking the end of this era. So yeah, abuse of world domination basically is how it's described. It's politically incorrect. So, with all that being said, the way that we interact with this, right, it's very much voluntary. There's a lot of pressure today. People are digging into the power structure. Collective consciousness seems to be rising. And a lot of people are kind of figuring out the score to the point of like obsession and neglecting nuance, right? I'd like to think that I have a very nuanced take on all this stuff. It's really not coming from a place of hate. I want as many people to make it to heaven as possible, and I don't wish for satanic initiatives to be successful. Which, if they're not successful, it's good for everybody. Those that are engaging in that are hurting themselves and others. So it would just be better if they didn't do it in the first place. So, anyway, yeah, completely well intended with all this, and like my best closest friend is Jewish. He was another one that really didn't know what he was until he was an adult either. I didn't really know what I was until recently, but we were drawn together because we have similar personality traits. A lot of people are catching on to the fact that the structure of world power right now is something that we're feeding by association, right? We're paying taxes, we're buying subscriptions, we're trading our life's essence for fiat currencies that are issued by central banks that practice fractional reserve lending, where they're handing out funny money in exchange for people's legit labor and time and expertise. And it is a system of slavery, basically, as a lot of people understand, right? So it's easy enough to figure out the people that are running that and those that are downstream from it as well, right? So when this modernized institution of it began, from what I'm able to understand, there was that going on, right? So in the case of the Rothschilds, that's what I'm getting at. So the Rothschilds ascended to power by way of this system of lending, plus acting as like an intel agency, right? So we're talking like blackmail and like CIA level intel that could be wielded to influence wars and stuff like that, because like we're in an intel age where you could use intel to shape public opinion and change the direction of world you could influence geopolitics and all that stuff with it, right? And you could compel world leaders to commit treason against their people by way of blackmail and bribery. So that institution started all the way back then when the family first rose to prominence. And as far as I know, they're still operating. I mean, Epstein was basically working for them, and they have a really wide network. So at their essence, yeah, they're bankers. They're probably not particularly religious. They may not even be conscious about what they're engaging in, but that's how it goes, right? Like, if you're a part of whatever respective coalition, like, you could have an intellectually impaired person, right, that's lining up with the will of God, even though they may not be able to read. You don't have to be particularly conscious or intellectual to fall in line with an agenda and to suit it, to do good work or to do bad work. So even though they're at a very high level of power, who knows what the religious convictions are or anything like that. We just know what the function is. So that's the function. And then the nexus goes downstream, right? So you're controlling information and currency, and we have like media, academia, entertainment, the military-industrial complex. Like, all of that is downstream from that. And then we have little clubs which basically guarantee a uniformity, group uniformity toward different initiatives that can be kept secret. In those fraternities, people get into places like Yale, for example. So, even though there's a head of a snake, just like with any like hive structure, there may develop a hive mind, and everybody plays their part. And that's kind of what we're tricked into broadly within, like, especially in a place like America. We're living in like this elaborate theater right now where nothing is as it seems, and we're just being worked on all the time with this like massively funded PSYOP campaign through the various social medias or whatever, because American public opinion is so powerful and consequential. So you need, especially as an American citizen, you need to treat it with respect and try to keep your head on straight with all this, which is kind of like the reason that I'm putting this out there, because I want good things to happen. And I don't want people to, I want people to earn heaven, and I don't want them to earn hell, and I want what's best for the world. So, with this collective consciousness, I mean, you could be feeding into either way. Speaking truth, even just as an individual, can be profoundly powerful, because we're not all just individuals. We are units of a greater whole. And I think that people have been able to really notice over the last couple of years, there's definitely been something going on with collective consciousness where all types of like unrelated people are ending up on the same page, being pushed in the same direction, picking up on common interests and stuff organically, right? Like, even in early internet history, you notice like the phenomena of virality. So just as animals may operate in hives, bees and ants or whatever, and there's a miracle in their synchronicity, and they're able to cooperate on that level, being very limited beings, but producing crazy work. Mankind functions the same way, even though our signals have been intentionally scrambled by evil people. They want to kind of monopolize the hive mind thing, which I think, the AI technology, I think, is the artificialization to harness human hive mind, and to influence it in such a way that it could be used. It's basically taking as much will out of the equation as possible to harness this power for bad means. But anyway, if you're trying to fall in line with righteousness, there is power to it. We all play our part, and it's very important to be cognizant of what you're investing in, what you're investing your attention into, your labor into, your resources into, right? So like when I was younger, I thought I would have to be like Amish to make it to heaven, until I started studying Quran. And then later I realized that, you should do whatever is in your means. you should be very careful about what you're investing into. Like the elite, look at the scale of their donations and stuff. Even like investing into politicians, like would you invest that? Would you invest that much of your resources into what you believe in? So we should be investing into what we believe in, and we should also be networking in a positive way to try to advance the will of God. I think that pretty much. I think that the end of it all, right? So I don't believe that these people that think that they control the end of the world actually do dictate that, nor do they believe that this despotic kingdom is ever going to be successfully established. Rather, it looks like we're probably approaching the end of an era right now where a house of cards is likely to collapse. So the concept of mercy, right? One of the key attributes of our Creator is that He is the merciful, right? Al-Rahman, Al-Rahim, the beneficent, the merciful, the gracious, the merciful. And He's all-powerful, right? He's all-merciful because He's all-powerful. He could destroy us if He wanted to, and He doesn't. That's mercy. So those who have great power are those who are the most able to practice mercy, right? Something that, like a baby that you're caring for is at your mercy. You are able to basically affect the outcome of its life in amazing ways or dire ways. And your mercy is what raises the baby. So same thing goes like in the case of human conflict. If somebody forces you to defend yourself and they become defeated, you are in a position where you can show mercy because you've established power over them. So if there's a shift in power that happens, some people are inclined to follow their vain desires to engage in barbarism, right? Like the accelerationist types that think that they're going to sort this situation out by doing evil as a means to an end. God does not favor the aggressors, and that's morally wrong. You need to fit within the moral boundaries if you're going to be successful. There's no workaround to the situation. So if you're going to be made to suffer a bad situation for a while, you need to do so as graciously as possible. Trust that God's going to see you through it, and when He does, be thankful of it, and don't seek retribution. So justice is all well and good, but there are rules to justice. And you're not supposed to be engaging in sadism. So I think accelerationism is not the right way to go. Sadistic retribution is also not the right way to go. You have an obligation, especially as a man, to be as strong as possible. You want to be capable. Men are inherently dangerous. It's part of being a man. The ideal man, like a superhero, is dangerous. A superhero can inflict damage upon others. But a superhero is restricted by their own morality, and they're not going out there and using their power for bad. And that's kind of like, as men, when we grow up as boys, we kind of understand that, and we want to aspire to be that. Some of us grow out of it because we become adulterated by the world. So we need to return to that, right? Become as powerful as you can with your male stature. Use it for good. And if we find ourselves in a situation at the end of whatever is going on right now where there's a shift in power, you have to restrict yourself by morality, right? And be somebody that shows mercy on defeated people. That is an opportunity to earn favor with God, I believe. Whereas on the flip side of it, if you are sadistic, and you are wronging people to satisfy your vain desires, you are indicting yourself, as Satan would like you to do. So, yeah, be strong, strengthen your community, contribute to the liberation from despotism so that we could have healthy families and follow God to the best of our ability. We want that path to be as easy as possible for everybody because we should want everybody to make it to heaven. When we pray, we're not, like, if we're reciting prayers, Al-Fatiha, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. We seek refuge with Allah from the accursed Satan. In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful. All praise is due to Allah, the Lord of the worlds, the Beneficent, the Merciful, owner of the Day of Recompense. You alone we worship, and you alone we seek for help. Guide us to the straight path, the path of those you have blessed, not the path of those who have earned your wrath, nor those who go astray. This is not singular. We are pleading for ourselves and others. So this is what we want. That is my stated will. And I hope we see it out on the other side as successful. I think many of us will be. But it's important as things begin to heat up that you keep your head on straight. You keep the ultimate objective in mind here. We want to strive toward godliness. And we don't want to allow the satanic coercion to take root, which it's important to note that these jinn do have the ability to whisper to the hearts of men. What that means is it may not be a whisper in your head, a consciously whisper. They may be affecting desires on a level that would lead you to believe that they are your own when they are not. So become acquainted with what a good desire is versus what a bad desire is, and condition yourself to understand God's will to the point where he becomes like his rhetorical questions are a reverberation in the back of your head permanently. You're able to identify good from bad on a very deep level. And you can resist these things when they come to you very early on so that you're not approaching something evil. So then be as strong as you can. Practice mercy. Spread love. Spread truth. And may we see our way out of this on the other side is better than we went into it. God bless you all. Thanks for listening.